Hi and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will bring you a wealth of interesting people with fascinating ideas across the tech industries, the creative industries, and also uplifting stories of courage and hope. We all go through prickly situations in life. I believe that through courage, creativity, and curiosity, you can find inspiration to nurture your zest. That thing that gets you up and out of bed every morning, the thing that lifts you up and lights up your day. So join me in the studio and let's see who we have in the hot seat today. Hello and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. I have been so eager to chat to Christina Lord, so I'm excited to share her with you. So Christina, welcome to Nurture Your Zest.
Thank you, Ashleigh. Really glad to be here.
Yeah, so I love your energy, and that's one of the reasons I've been wanting to chat to you. So I always see you at events. You see me, we do a bit of a hi across the room, but we don't always get the time to really soak up each other's presence. So speaking of energy, I think that's a great place to start. What is it about energy that attracts people? What do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, energetics. It's been a theme in my life, I would say, for the past few years. I would say when people are being true to themselves and being kind of, embodied and, really looking at a place of enjoying their surroundings, enjoying where they are, who they're with, then that energy can radiate out of a person. But the thing about energy to know is, I think we all can say that, emotions are energy in motion, really, when you think about it. And the way that most of us were brought up, there are good and bad emotions. But the way I like to encourage people to think about it is, no, they're different frequencies, and we need the light and we need the dark. We need that polarity. So when somebody is lit up, then it's because they're playing in kind of their zone of brilliance. And I think that's what radiates. But any energy can radiate from a person, really. And it's just then what attracts you to what. That's why we say, and we joked before we went live, didn't we? Like energy attracts like energy. So it's noticing the feeling that somebody kind of radiates from them. Yeah.
I love that. It's a great place to start. So before we get into the juicy bits of all this energy stuff, can you tell us a little bit about you and your life and your childhood or whatever you want to say about what brought you to your life today?
Wow, that's a big question. I guess. So I was born in Sunderland. So I am from the Northeast originally. Grew up and had a very happy childhood. There was me and my older sister, who's 3.5 years older than me. Just a very lovely childhood, actually, overall. So parents were still together. And then, I went to university in Yorkshire. So I moved to Huddersfield. So I kind of generated a very Yorkshire accent for a while there. I just had a wonderful time at university. So I actually studied graphic design. So always been creative, always been a creative child. Could always find me sitting drawing or making something. Just brought me a lot of joy. Loved singing, was in choirs. So very playful. Always cared. I think I would say that I've always been an emotional person, that I really have always been fascinated how people tick. And I think that's been, that's ran through to adulthood. And then, when I graduated, I then actually went into advertising. So I went into marketing agencies, the fast pace of advertising, which I absolutely loved. It was exciting. There was lots going on, but I think I soon learned that, the pace of working and trying to balance it with your passions was a little bit of a challenge, and I'm sure we'll touch upon that as we go. But generally speaking, as to what has led me to where I am now, Yeah, I've definitely ridden some waves, and at times, and I'm sure we'll touch upon, I would say I've dived for light. Yeah, there's just been a definite, I suppose experiencing life, the depth and breadth of life. I believe to know real joy, you've kind of got to know real sadness.
That's really powerful, experiencing the depths and breadths of life. It makes me think of something I read once. I forget where I read it or which faith it was from, but it was this idea of being like water. And so with water, it can be snow, it can be steam, it can be ice, it can be, vapor. Water is just so powerful and flexible and fluid. And it's always shifting. And it just makes me think about what you're saying there about really just riding the wave of life. And I mean, that's quite an experience to go through because none of us know what is around the corner at any point.
Nope.
No. So yeah, I really resonate with that already. So, okay. I mean, I'm curious about, have you ever had that moment where you kind of like working with someone, you're coaching someone, or you're doing an activity and you just feel like this is incredible? Like I have that when I'm doing Nurture Zest, just chatting to people who I find interesting and who inspire me. I feel like I am glowing, like shining from within. It is such a powerful feeling. Or if I'm helping someone, particularly if they stuck or if they have a confidence block, kind of working through that. And I feel like I could explain it as like dripping gold. It feels so juicy and wonderful. And then there's the other tasks or the other experiences of life, like doing your bookkeeping. It just doesn't bring the same joy. And I'm just wondering, do you ever experience that where you're just like, wow, I get to do this? Like, this is my life. This is so cool.
Yeah. Oh, well, everything you just said resonated with it. And to go back to what you were saying about the snow and the ice and the water, I mean, that is transformation of energy. And what I love about the whole energetic side of things, you can take a very spiritual or symbolic kind of view of it. Or you can actually, it's grounded in science, right? So Einstein said that energy can't be destroyed, it can only be transformed. And so by not being able to destroy anything, it's open to us to play with. And I think what you expressed there about being lit up, and I love the gold analogy, I think, and it makes total sense for what you share, right? Because I think when you meet people who intrigue you, then it highlights that you are a naturally curious person. It highlights that you are naturally empathetic, which is kind of the whole seek first to understand, like help me understand you. And that resonates a lot. And certainly when I'm in coaching sessions, it's like nothing else exists. I am 100% present with that person. And you said it yourself, when you interview, you feel honored. I feel the same. When I spend time with people, even before we speak, I prepare myself as in, I just want to be as blank slate as I possibly can be, which is not totally 100% possible. We all have our biases, we've got stuff going on, but I try and just be that clean mirror. So I reflect back what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling. And it is, for me, coaching is a co-creation. And I think conversation is too. And that's why I think when we get lit up, there are values and traits and things that excite us that get mirrored back. So then it becomes expansive. So it's a both and you're both kind of playing and seeing where things go and exploring. And I think it's a creative act, honestly.
I agree. It's like a dance. It's imaginative. It's fun. It's playful. It's mischievous. It's just all those juicy, gorgeous things. Yeah. And you don't get that with everyone. So I think when you feel that frequency, as you might say, or that connection, it is really nice.
Yeah.
You spoke about the quantum field as in, energy, and I'm with you there. So I'm a very spiritual person, and I know there's spiritual frames of looking at things, but there's also the scientific ones. And, it's those kind of experiments people have done around water and how you might speak to water and seeing that actually if you have a positive or a negative words every day, they have a huge, tremendous effect. And if you look at that water under a microscope, the power of those words, which also extends to the plants and the animals around us, the children around us, the people, our jobs, our careers. But it's hard for people because sometimes, for whatever reason, we might be stuck. We might be in a negative space. We might feel like we are in a situation where we're kind of like, I don't know at what point I got here, but it doesn't feel right anymore.
Yeah.
I see this a lot with people where they sort of feel like they woke up and they're like, hang on, when did I agree to have this experience of life? At what point did I just let all this power go? Or when did I become this person? I don't know who this person is anymore. And I wonder if you have any thoughts from your coaching of what do you think leads people to that kind of awakeness or experience?
Yeah, no, I again resonates, and I've seen that a lot. I've experienced that with many people that I coach. Obviously, a lot of people come to coaching because they're stuck, because something just isn't vibing for them, or they're wanting to improve in a certain area or explore something to unblock or to just free themselves. And that's certainly why I came to coaching. I think I'll start there. When I went through a pretty big dark night of the soul, so 2010, my mum got diagnosed with a rare form of brain cancer. And it happened just at a time when I was promoted within quite a senior level job. And it's just everything happened all at once. And I learned about myself that I had this default mode of, well, you just roll your sleeves up and you crack on. The determination just takes over and you just think, right, I'm going to just make it all work. And then what becomes apparent is you can actually end up staying strong for too long. And so in reflection, because we can only reflect backwards, we can't reflect forwards, that actually the wheels had started to come off. And I had inadvertently started to burn myself out. And I hadn't realised that. But I'd become this person that, was there for everybody else. And inadvertently, I'd found myself in a place where I was at the bottom of that priority list. And so then you start to realise that, you start to change, but it's a very slow, incremental pace, and everything's so busy around you that you've almost got no time. And I certainly didn't have any time for reflection. And so it wasn't until my body was screaming at me to stop that I actually was forced to stop. And this is what I find with many of the people who I work with, that we need to find times and spaces to slow down so that we can speed back up again. And that's not easy, because for most of us, we live in a culture where we attribute our success and our feel good to being busy and having lots going on. And we seldom take the time just to be still, breathe, and just check in with yourself. Not even just with your mind, but how you're feeling emotionally and how your body's feeling. I think many people are disconnected from their soul, if you want to say that, whatever you call it, the higher power. But your physical body as well, because that keeps the score, and that is all sending you lots of signals a lot of the time. And if we're not open to listen, then those signals are going to get louder. Which
is a really powerful place to talk about things like, like you said, the body keeps the score, but talking about burnout, as you're saying there, your body is giving you signals all the time. And for many of us, we don't even realize. I know before I was diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, I was so out of tune with my body. So I would forget to eat, forget to drink, hyper focus on things. And I just didn't understand what that was. So the disconnection between myself and things was just, I just was so disconnected. And actually it's been a real gift because I've learned so much along the way. But I think for many of us, we suppress those feelings. You get niggles, don't you? You get those little, something's up with this person. I don't know what's going on here, but it doesn't feel right. Oh no, you're just being judgmental, or you're just being this, or, you know, just give them a chance. And it's like that trust of our own instinctual feelings and niggles and vibrations. You know, it doesn't mean you can't be wrong about things or wrong about people, but I think the more connected you are to yourself, that intuition can be so powerful. But this concept of niggles is important. So what kind of things do you see people struggle with before they get to burnout?
Yeah, no, it's a really strong question. So a lot of the time when we talk about niggles, we talk about triggers. And, you know, within coaching and self-development and professional development, we talk about triggers being opportunities for growth. And a lot of that intellectually, you're like, well, yeah, that makes total sense, that if something kind of pings me, that, you know, that it's going to tell me something. But it's really actually in practice hard to do. And we have to connect our feeling in our body to our emotional feelings, to the story that we tell ourselves, because often we feel something and we make it mean something by what we, you know, the story we tell. So what I like to say to people is to practice compassionate curiosity. And by that I mean, when we are compassionate, we are generally soft, open. We're not protective, we're leaning in with love. And to be curious is to be open and playful and explorative. So I like those two elements, because when we're not those things, we can be closed, we can be protective and standoffish. And I think when we're that to ourselves, then it doesn't kind of help us see a way through. So what I like to do with people is to help them start there, to get compassionately curious with how they're feeling, and to notice that all feelings are a visitor. Everything is transient. It's always changing in us, and nothing stays the same. And so often I'll do things, and that's be it on a one-to-one, be it in group within organizations, to actually start to say, right, if you are feeling a certain way, if you feel yourself, for example, get hot, often when we get triggered, if somebody annoys us, we can feel heat in our body, we can feel constriction. A lot of people bypass that though and go straight into, I don't like this person, as opposed to, okay, I'm having a reaction. That's interesting. And then being able to explore it with what part of me is having a reaction and why might I be having that reaction. And once you start to open it up, you start to ask yourself open-ended questions. And with those open-ended questions, what normally comes out is there was something within us that got pulled and we didn't like it. And so that part of us that we've probably pushed down back, you know, in our childhood or at any point in our past, it became a protective thing, which we tend to push people away when we get triggered. And it's been my experience and my continued practice to get curious, get compassionately curious when I get triggered, so that I can, see the opportunity, feel the opportunity. And I think the more you can get into that space, the more you can redirect your energy and not get sucked down into the downward spiral or the resentment or the anger or the frustration. All of those are human emotions that are natural, but we don't have to get consumed and swallowed by them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think giving yourself permission to feel things is a big one. So you spoke there about kind of the layers that people have and the ways that we decide to protect ourselves without even being consciously aware of it. When I first discovered neurolinguistic programming, NLP, I was so shocked by some of the decisions I'd made of when did I decide to stop being soft. And I can remember being at a festival and somebody saying to me, "You're really soft, aren't you?" And they were a different personality to me, also a woman, but they were more brash, more outspoken. And I think perhaps I triggered them in a way. And they just happened to say, "You're really soft." And they just said that one line. But to me, it was like oh, well, maybe I should be more brash or more something else. I don't know. And actually, I only realized when my daughter was born because it felt like my heart unlocked and just the range of emotion that developed, that just like, it was like an ocean of emotion and feeling. And it really knocked me. It was powerful and beautiful, but also wild and fierce and stormy. Actually, I love being soft, and it's a beautiful gift to be able to be soft, because it means you can be there for people, you can hold space for them, you can be empathetic, you can nurture. When did I decide not to nurture? That's a really good question. But we don't consciously note these things, do we?
We don't, and I think a lot of it is unconscious because we develop patterns. We're made of patterns. We're made of energy. We're made of patterns. And I think from what you describe, a lot of the time, you take any plethora of personality tests or, Myers-Briggs or Enneagram, or we love to label, don't we? I'm a this, I'm a that. What I prescribe to is that we are multifaceted. Like we can be incredibly soft, we can be incredibly hard, and we dance in between that all of the time. And seldom is somebody one thing all the time. It's impossible. Yes, we have natural proclivity, but I think what we notice is whatever happens in people's lives, that starts to create then who they become. And so we're kind of like clay, I guess, modeled. And sometimes, dark nights of the soul can happen where everything gets stripped away, where you feel like you are, like you've lost everything. But in doing that, you get to rebuild. And I think that's been my experience when I've gone through very challenging times in my life where I feel like everything has just gone. But then there's this beautiful space that happens where you start to think, going from I have nothing to I have nothing. I have freedom. I have choice. I have the ability to look at things differently. And I think the moment we can remind ourselves, so I remind myself often, and obviously as a coach and a breathwork facilitator, I am constantly in the space of asking questions and, asking people to tell me more. And it's only really through asking open-ended questions that people start to, and you can often see they'll look up or they'll look to the side and think, like, what did I just say that you picked up on that made you think that? Because a lot of the time we don't slow the conversation down, do we, to clarify, oh, when you said that, what did you mean? Tell me more about that. And that's where the real juicy stuff comes in, of where we can start to be more playful. Because I think conversation is a dance. Our emotions are a dance. And I think the moment we can dance with them rather than try and run away from them, that's where we can start to cultivate some of our power and the fact that we know we have a choice.
I love that. And I love this idea of a dance. There's a book called The Dance of Anger, The Dance of Sadness, all these different things. But it's a little bit of transactional analysis of this idea of, you can change the steps to the dance. So you might be in a situation, for anyone listening or watching, where, you are feeling stuck and feeling like, how did this pattern emerge that I didn't realize, and how do I break out of it? Well, it takes a bit of courage to learn some new steps, but you can actually switch up that pattern and you can change it. But it takes some courage. It really does. I think as well, I wanted to talk to you about labels. So we've talked a little bit there about, you know, neurodiversity or this kind of thing, or stuff people go through. And I feel like as we go through life, we start picking things up, whether it's like a label or a thing someone said, we almost kind of start building these protective houses of riffraff and like misfit, disheveled things, tiles that don't fit, and we carry them around and they're super heavy, and we don't even remember when we decided to pick them up. But actually, sometimes those labels don't serve. So for me, in my own neurodiversity journey, I think it's important to talk about neurodiversity, and I think it's important to normalize discussions around it, because you can't be what you can't see, and it's important to have representation. However, one thing that I'm aware of is that actually oversubscribing to a label can be really harmful.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think labels can limit you, essentially. Labels can empower you. There's no two ways about it. But I think with every concept, there is the yin and yang. There is the light and dark. Yeah. And so I think it is it's that reflection. It's the awareness. Everything starts with awareness. And it is bringing the unconscious conscious. It's shining a light on, okay, let's look at why I view myself in that way, or how does that label empower me, or how does that label constrict me? Because I hear a lot of people will tell me, I'm not creative, for example. Like, I hear that all the time, and I prescribe to all human beings are creative. Like, anything, a conversation is creative. It's bringing something that hasn't yet existed into being. That for me is creativity. And so I liked for people to find what lights them up, what kind of makes them curious and open and playful, but also to ask themselves probably some radically honest questions, and sometimes to feel a bit uncomfortable, to say, when did you start believing this about yourself? Because normally it's something that's happened, and some labels can become like protective armor. And I think when we're armored up, then we start to lose our humanity. We start to lose our essence. And I think over time, I can say for me personally, and for a lot of people that I coach, it tends to be things that happen in your life where, I can call them, cosmic 2x4 to the head, or like a life tremor, or something that's going to shake you up. And it shakes us awake. It just totally shakes us awake. And we then have the opportunity to start to say, I want to know what I'm capable of. I want to know that I can morph and change and explore myself. And I don't have to be just one way. I don't have to be super soft. I don't have to be brash and hard. I can dance between those two. And I can pattern interrupt. So when I feel like I'm being too soft in an environment, I can pattern interrupt, and I can redirect, and I can embody another part of me. And I think that's when you can kind of become a bit more chameleon-esque, if you will.
I like that pattern interrupt idea. I think it gives you a sense of power, or a sense of control, or a sense of, hey, I can influence what I'm going through. I can play with this. I can reframe it. I can learn from this. I can grow from this. It's a real different perspective. Something I notice when people grow, when they're going through stuff and they start making positive shifts, is sometimes the people around them, it can get really uncomfortable. Do you find that sometimes with the people you help? And what do you think is the answer if you're going through that kind of growth and being challenged by the people around you?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the time we like certainty. as human beings, we like, well, that's who I know you to be. So I want you to continue to be who you are. Because we will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven every day of the week. It's crazy, but it's true. But what I do see, and it's funny actually, when I did my coaching program, so energy leadership, I was working in the US at the time, and it was the first weekend training we were doing, and somebody had mentioned that they'd nicknamed the course the divorce course.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because so many people going through it, because as coaches, you actually do your own personal development work. You strip away the layers to find out what's going on underneath, to learn some of the tools and hold space for each other. And it was really interesting to me that when we grow, when we change, when we metamorphosize, the people who are used to us being a certain kind of way get uncomfortable. They kind of go, well, I don't like this version of you. You're no longer this version. I want you to be that version. And I think what tends to happen and why it's been called the divorce course is that people's rate of growth is different. And often we say that you can only meet somebody as deep as you've met yourself. And we all have varying degrees of introspection. Some people just don't want to know. But I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast are ones that are introspective, hence why they're tuning in to nurture your zest, to actually be curious and open and, want to learn about yourself. So what I like to remind people is, again, with the compassionate curiosity with yourself, and the other, to say, maybe that other person doesn't like you changing because they profited, they benefited from you being too soft, too brash, too whatever. And so often I like to share my coaching skill by actually training and teaching some of my coachees how to coach, how to have open conversations with their partner, their children, their colleagues, especially in the organizational space, asking open-ended questions, mirroring back what you hear, clarifying, but remaining open and curious. There's real power in that. And it's flexing that muscle of not taking anything personally, which is so much more easy than said than done.
Gosh, it really is.
Yeah.
I mean, getting unsolicited feedback or just hearing what people think and the stories they tell themselves about you can feel really personal because it's about you.
Of course.
So I think that's a really interesting one. Something I'm curious about is I see so many women between 40 to 60 lose themselves, and it's a phenomenon called the invisible woman. And I'm just curious because I see you as someone who shines very brightly, and I love that you are so visible and bright and perhaps holding up a mirror for other people. But I'm curious about yourself. When you've mentioned earlier about shining so brightly, you can burn out, right?
Oh, yeah.
As can any star. Have you ever experienced negativity or kind of a bit of a kind of, well, who do you think you are to do that? Or why do you think you have the right to do this? Or shouldn't you be prioritizing your time in this way? Or can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, just when you were saying about lights going out and certainly that age range, I mean, for me, I was 35 when my light went out. And so that was actually after... So I'd lost my mum in 2010, and this was more around the 2014, 2015 mark. Basically, again, the messages from the universe, however you want to say it, kept sending me all these signals, but I was too busy. I was too busy listening. I was too busy living my life. I was too busy climbing that ladder, that, the I'll be happy when blueprint that gets prescribed, that like you tick all of these check boxes and you will be happy. You will reach Shangri-La, whatever it is. And then you get to a certain level, having put all of that effort in, and then you realize that you're not fulfilled. You're like, hold on, something's not chiming here. I've done what I should have done. I've done the blueprint. I've ticked the boxes. Why am I still not fulfilled? And then for me, it dawned on me that I wasn't being true to myself. And so I was abandoning myself. And I think that's where you become an invisible woman. And then it's the fall from grace, because then what life does, and it actually does it for your greatest growth. It doesn't feel like it at the time. It definitely doesn't. It hurts like hell. But, you know, I joke now is to say the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. And in that being pissed off, it asks you some sharp questions. Who are you? What do you care about? What do you want? You know, what do you want your life to be? And I think you can realize that unconsciously we are in autopilot. I'm definitely a recovering people pleaser. With being a naturally empathetic person, I will be amiable. I will mold in any shape you want me to be, to do anything you need me to do. But I learnt the hard way that in order for me not to abandon myself, boundaries are needed. And I learned that the hard way in 2015. So my 16-year relationship ended.
Right.
And I, you know, kind of hit rock bottom, and I, you know, did the dark night of the soul searching, but it was a call to adventure. And in that I have nothing. Like the two sides of the same coin. I decided that I was going to breathe life back into myself. So I actually hit the effort button on my life back then, quit my career. My relationship had ended. I put my apartment up for rent. I bought a backpack and I travelled the world. I did an Eat, Pray, Love. I embodied Liz Gilbert. And for me, and not everybody can do that, for me, that was my path. I think most people thought I'd lost the plot. I think there were people at work because they were seeing me climb the ladder and being this person that was embodying, oh, well, that's what you should be doing. And I think I shocked a hell of a lot of people by me just doing a pattern interrupt and kind of going, no, I'm taking a hard right. And many people were like, but what are you going to do when you get back? And I remember thinking, I don't know. Like, I just don't know. But I know I have to go. I know I have to get out of this place of going through the motions. And I think that's why when I meet and sense other people that I meet through my coaching or outside of that, I'll get a sense often that they are prescribing to shutting on themselves, because we all do a good amount of shutting on ourselves. And just by asking the simple question of, should you? What are your other choices? What if? And you can just open possibility up. Then you can start to see, and this is my favorite thing in coaching conversation, to see the light of awareness turn on in someone's eyes. That's when you know you can start to reignite that flame that maybe just has gone out, but it's gone out to tell you something, to create a change.
I think that's so powerful, just hearing your story there, the road less traveled. Sometimes the courage to kind of pattern interrupt and go, okay, everything's kind of all up in the air, but I'm going to pack my backpack and go on this adventure. And wow, that's incredible courage. So what did you learn from yourself being alone and exploring?
Oh, it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. I handed in my notice in the January and I had 3 months notice to give. And I often say I have never felt so powerful in my entire life. I was both terrified and felt powerful in equal measure. In fact, I think I'm still trying to get back to that state, if I'm honest. But that for me, and when you read a lot of spiritual text and Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, that was definitely my shero's journey. And I answered the call to adventure. And I feel like for a lot of months, the call kept coming and I wasn't open to listen to it. So the signal had to get louder for me to listen. And then I took the leap. And I think a lot of people were thinking, oh, like, this is crazy. This is too much. This is too far. So I had a family member say to me, I think she was worried about me doing something that was, maybe in her eyes, a little over the top. But before I really connected brain to mouth, I found myself saying, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I think it's because I was living so muted for so long that I felt like there was a part of me, my inner free spirit, that just wanted to burst out. But I did have a lot of out-of-body experiences where I was telling people what my plan was. So I'd mapped out, I think it was like 14 flights over 12 months of where I was going to go. And I remember thinking to myself, there was a part of me that would go, oh, have you lost the plot? Are you crazy? You know? But then there was something in me that just said, no, actually, you're doing the right thing. Yes, you don't know what's ahead of you, but this is the very reason why you need to go to breathe that life back into yourself again.
So you talked about Eat, Pray, Love. What was it like traveling and seeing other cultures and experiencing different customs? What did that teach you about yourself?
It fundamentally taught me that actually I'm a lot more courageous than I give myself credit for. And that uncertainty, whilst being scary, is filled full of possibility. The other thing it taught me was it really reinstilled my faith in human nature, if I'm honest. Before I went away, so part of my trip was traveling through Sri Lanka and India. And I had lots of people kind of go, oh my God, are you crazy? That's very dangerous. And often I would say, well, how do you know? Have you been? And they'd be like, oh, well, no. And so how do you know then if you've not been? And actually, India was one of those places where I actually witnessed the most kindness. And I think all of our relating is a mirror, and the energy that you bring is often the energy that will get reflected back to you. So if you are agitated and angry and unforgiving, then that's possibly the energy you're going to get back. I mean, that's not always true. There definitely were situations traveling where I sensed the energy shifted and I got the hell out of there. But for the most part, my most favorite thing about travel was to connect and have conversations with people. I stayed in a lot of hostels. And what I loved the most is just chatting to people over breakfast. And they'd tell me about their lives. They'd tell me about all of these weird and wonderful things that they'd experienced traveling. And the last question they would ask is, oh, by the way, what's your name? Because that was the least important thing to ask, you know, because there was so much more to go on. So it definitely reinstilled my faith in human nature, but I think it reinstilled faith in myself. And I think that's, as cheesy it is to say, it was true. And I hold those memories very, very dear to me. And I go back and I refuel myself a lot of the time from that. So
that is beautiful. I'd like to ask you a question, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but 16 years is a long time to be with someone and then for things to not work out, but people change. And I also think it's important, especially for women, that we are open about relationships ending and loss, and, you know, we have options and choices, and I think that's important. What I was going to say is, how does love feel for you now after loss?
Oh, this is such a good question. So what does love mean to me now? It's not about attachment. So I actually have a tattoo on my arm that says connected to everything, attached to nothing. And the reason I got that put on me in ink, it was actually after my dad passed away in 2022. So that was a whole other dark night of the soul that I definitely ventured through with grief. But what love means to me now is that it's about presence. It's about being radically thankful and grateful for everything. And that all of this is borrowed. We don't possess anything, and we certainly don't possess another person. So I love the analogy of, you know, if you come across a beautiful wildflower, you would water that flower, you would look and admire it. What you wouldn't do is pluck it for yourself, because then you would kill its life force. And I think the same is true for relationships. So I had an amazing 16 years with that person. They weren't all amazing. And it was meant to change. What it taught me is that you need to live your life in chapters, that nothing is nothing can stay the same forever, and that with all change, things need to end. But often with change is when we come out of an ending, it sparks a new beginning, which, you know, a beginner's mind, the unknown, the uncertainty, the fear, it's all there. Then we kind of have the messy middle where, you know, it's a bit foggy, we don't really know. And then will become another ending. But I think we go through cycles of change where it's, you know, the beginning, the middle, the end, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And I think the more we view life through that lens, the more we see that, well, things are meant to end so that new things can begin. And so now I view love as it's a way of being. It's a state of seeing yourself, and that it encompasses all the messiness of life and all the messiness of being human. But it leaves space for the essence of seeing glimmers in each other and being curious as to when we come across people who are maybe, you know, troubled in some way, because we all are in some ways. But it's about being compassionately curious with ourselves and each other.
So you still believe in love?
I still absolutely. In fact, it's been strengthened, I think. I'm very lucky. I'm in a new-ish relationship, in the first year of a new relationship. And what's blissful about it is we're both 100% transparent with each other. So everything gets talked about. And I think we've both had prior relationships where that wasn't the way.
I love that. I love how you have been through so much grief, jealousy thrown at you, growth, self-forgiveness, self-curiosity, learning, holding space for others, going through a loss, like a relationship loss, traveling the world, and then still believing in love. And that's just beautiful. And I think that one of the things you've said in this episode has been about being a mirror and holding space for others and holding light for others. And I think that's beautiful. So I thank you so much for your time today. Before we end, I need to know, what is your number one word to nurture your zest?
Oh, my number one word to nurture your zest. You know, I'm going to have to go with breathe. Because it's the first thing we do when we come into this life. It's the last thing we do when we exit it. And we forget the power of it. So it's to breathe. Beautiful.
I'm someone who forgets to breathe. I'm actually working with a vocal coach at the moment who keeps telling me, like, do you realize you just don't breathe? Like, just breathe. So that's a really powerful reminder. And I think, part of that is being attuned to the niggles or the signals that your body's giving you. So thank you so much for that, Christina. Thank you so much for listening to Nurture Your Zest today. If you're feeling extra kind, it would mean so much to me if you could share this episode with your friends or family, or anyone who you think might feel inspired by this content. Liking, sharing, or interacting with our content is a great way to support us as content creators, and it helps us to bring interesting stories and more people to you. This podcast is a Flamingo Heights podcast studio production, and I've been your host, Ashleigh King. If you liked today's episode, follow the video on your screen now, or check out the link in your show notes to find similar content.